Are you guys interested in any other carriers in the future?
Absolutely. We're already in discussions with over 30, I believe, regional carriers all around the U.S. We've talked to the other major CDMA carrier about carrying the phone through their retail channel, and they're interested in testing it in their lab. I haven't had enough phones to ship them to go through that process with them. But it's likely that at least the MVNOs, the regional carriers will carry it, and perhaps even the other major CDMA carrier will carry it in retail.
And if I remember correctly, the phone can be easily adjusted for GSM, right? I mean, not like super
That's
easily.
correct. So I'm going to turn this off here, pop the back off. But this one has a hole cut in it for the antennas. I'll show the camera there. The very top of it would normally be covered, but I've got antenna access here because this has been in the lab testing. But if you see what those two antenna ports are, and see the bottom edge of a board that's right here, that daughter board contains all of the cellular chipset for the phone. And we have other daughter boards that we're working on. The next one we're working on is a GSM UMTS replacement. So you can see there's a SIM slot here. The SIM card is used by CDMA carriers outside the U.S. It's not used by the two major U.S. carriers. But the phone supports it. So you could activate the phone on China Telecom, for example, using their SIM card, and it would work in China. That same SIM slot will be available for the GSM version of the phone. We do not yet have any kind of a target date on that product. I'm spending all my resources getting the Verizon version out the door, but the anticipation is that we'll build a GSM version, and Verizon's talked to us about getting an LTE version. We've looked at a WiMAX chipset. It could go to any of those, but so far the only one I can commit to is the CDMA EVDO that's in here at the moment.
Okay. Is there any kind of ETA for this to hit store side or hit when is Saygus going to offer it?
So what's blocking it at the moment is getting into full production manufacturing.
Okay.
And we've passed all the technical hurdles. That should happen rather quickly. We hope to be shipping phones before the end of the year. I don't have a firm commitment on that. It's tied up in the business end of the conversations.
Right on, great.
Can you give us any idea on what you're expecting it to retail for?
Again, these are not firm numbers, but estimates. We anticipate a retail price without a contract of somewhere around $450. If we did a 2-year contract with one of the carriers, that should translate to $150, $180, somewhere in that range.
That's really good price point.
We don't have commitments on any of that yet, and that's for the most part going to be up to the carrier. But those are the targets.
Well, I mean,
we're shooting for.
Most of the other phones in that type of niche market, not necessarily Android, but they've been, in my opinion, they've kind of priced themselves out of it, hitting at a price point in the $600 or $700 range where you're just not going to see somebody buy it. So that's encouraging to hear.
So again, that's an influence of how much we put in R&D. We've done this on a much smaller budget than any of the other smartphones that are on the market, and we anticipate selling at a reasonable retail rate in order to get the kind of volume in the market. We are looking at future products, and if this product is successful, the next hardware design we're looking at will have HDMI, high-res video output direct from the phone, things like that. But that's all contingent on this one obviously being successful, so we have the money to fund the next one.
Can you list off all the specifications of the internals of the device?
Sure. These are available at saygus.com/vphone. You can find a full spec list, but I'll give you the overview. It runs a Marvell PXA 310 processor at 806 megahertz, 256 meg of internal RAM, 512 meg of internal flash, USB host and client, as I talked about, Wi-Fi, both client and access point device and ad hoc.
The Wi-Fi BG or in?
G. I don't think I've got N support. I think it's G.
Yeah, G.
Okay. I'll have to talk to Marvell, actually. N may be possible, but I'm focusing on all the other issues, so G is what's listed. The display is an 800 by 480 LCD. I don't know what else you want to cover. Full QWERTY keyboard.
3.2?
It's about 3.5 inch diagonal.
Looks bigger.
With the camera,
the rear camera is 5 megapixel autofocus with a flash. The forward-facing camera, which is this little dot right up here in the corner, is VGA resolution. Either one is usable during the video calling. You can switch back and forth between cameras, and you can switch back and forth in the camera application itself.
What capacity is the battery?
The battery is a 1500 milliamp battery. That's a little bit larger than most phones in the market. And again, if you're using it in Wi-Fi access point mode, you're probably going to be drawing a little more power than most phones in the market. So we purposely put in a larger battery. I don't have a splash boot screen yet, but it'll be branded for different carriers and different regional carriers based, on boot screen logos. May have some theming in the desktop as well.
Will the key presses for booting into recovery be available
Yes.
as public knowledge?
Yes, and the bootloader that should be on the phone will support fast boot right out of the box. So if you want to flash an IMG, you don't need to build a custom ROM. In addition to booting off the microSD that I mentioned, if you have a kernel image, which is really the kernel plus a initRD, and a file system on your microSD card, you should be able to boot into that directly just by holding down a key press. The USB port that's on here is a mini USB, not a micro USB. That was intentional. There's a mini USB that has a 10-pin connector instead of just a 5. That's what this device has. So the mini USB includes your regular USB pins for host and client, and the other wires are used for audio, left-right channel, and mic input. So you can, I don't have a headphone jack on the phone, but with an adapter you can plug both power and your headset in externally using the splitter. It also has two of the remaining wires are used for a serial console. So if you're doing kernel development, you can plug in a USB to a TTY level converter and run directly with the serial console into the kernel. You can actually reflash the phone over that serial console. If you erase all of flash, you can reflash it from the phone.
One more brief, real quick. One of the things that we talked about earlier, you're the phone in and of itself. You want to be able to do all of the same data sets that you're doing, over Wi-Fi and over 3G, set up over IP as well. Voice over IP, video over IP.
Correct.
It's phenomenal.
So we again, I don't have the final issues of our data plan signed with Verizon, but in our conversation is we're asking for all the forms of tethering to be supported and voice and video over IP, and they're very aware of the voice and video because the name vPhone is from video phone. That's what we're trying to push, and they're very excited about that feature. So certainly voice and video will be supported over the cellular network as well as over Wi-Fi, and the current conversation is that also all the forms of tethering will be available on the one data plan that you buy with the phone. You won't need to buy an additional tethering data plan.